those of you just joining us, my name is Stephanie Herrick. I'm the board president of the City of Minnetonka Historical Society. So welcome and thank you for being here tonight. This is a wonderful turnout. If this is your first Historical Society event or your first time hearing about us, I'll just quickly share with you what we do. So we are an entirely volunteer-run organization with the mission of saving and sharing Minnetonka history. So some of the ways we do that are through collecting photos and artifacts, conducting research, publishing a newsletter, and putting on events like this one. So, however, we are a small organization, and again, we're entirely volunteer-run. So we really rely on the support of our community. So if you're interested in getting involved, we do have some information about membership and volunteering at the back table there. So feel free to grab that on your way out tonight. And with that said, it's now my honor to introduce our guest speaker for the evening, Jerrold Gershone. Jerrold described his journey as from admin to community organizer for nature. After nearly 40 years, Jerrold and his business partners sold their healthcare marketing firm in 2020. Since then, Jerrold has been part of starting two nonprofits, Friends of Cullen Nature Preserve and Friends of Minnetonka Parks. He also started a YouTube channel, Habitat Makers, about people in groups devoted to ecological restoration. Jerrold is going to present tonight on the remarkable legacy of Minnetonka resident Cullen and the restoration work taking place at the Cullen Nature Preserve. So, without further ado, I will turn it over to Jerrold.
Thank you, and thanks to the Historical Society for asking me to speak tonight. If you think I need a mic, if anyone thinks, raise your hand, I can use a mic as well. But I speak rather, mic, okay? Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay, is that better?
It's not on.
It is on, yes.
There it is.
Right under your chin there.
I can find about it.
Okay, is that better? Okay, good. Good, now that we know that, and get started. So, as Stephanie was saying, I'm the president of the Friends of Cullen Nature Preserve, and I'm not a historian, I'll say that right away. So if anyone wants to fact check me real time, go for it. I've done my best to make this as accurate as possible, and I've learned a lot in the process. So this is about Cullen Smith, a remarkable person, remarkable resident of Minnetonka, and you're going to learn her story. And it's not just about a person or people, it's also about the land. It's a story of the land and how Cullen Smith got connected to this land. And this land, the Cullen Nature Preserve, not open to the public yet, is about only 2 miles away, right off Oakland Road. So the original habitat of this land, as well as most of Minnetonka, was oak savanna. And when I came in tonight and saw the beautiful oak tree in front that I know the city's been working to save, and it's actually looking pretty good, that's what most of Minnetonka was. From up until about 101. After that was more the maple, basswood, big woods. And the original stewards of this land, of course, were the Native Americans. Native Americans were part of creating and maintaining the savanna. In this area, it would have been the Made-Wakatan tribe that did that. So when I talk more about the preserve, we're going to come back and talk about the role of the Native Americans, which was hugely important. So Cullen Smith, I'm not sure how old she was in this portrait, but I kind of think she looks determined there. And when you hear about her life, you'll find out what a truly determined person she was. And since this is for the Historical Society, I thought I better go back in time and find out what I can learn about Cullen Smith. Who was she? How did she get connected to this land? So I went way back. As the Norman conquest of England. And I got my information from her son, wonderful keeper of the family history, Bill Cullen. And what I learned was that the family and I researched this part myself, I believe the original name was Jouet. They were French. It was anglicized to Jewett because what the family did was they moved when the Norman Conquest happened. They moved to Bradford, England. It's near Leeds. And then at some point, 1638, the family and others who felt religious persecution went overland from Leeds to Hull, where they got on a ship. I think it was at least 50 miles they walked. So that's the kind of the early history as far back as we could go. And then this, I find this photo rather remarkable. So now we jumped ahead to the 1850s. And this is, let me get the name right, Anne Wilder Jewett Johnson. So the name again, Jewett, that was probably originally Jouet in France. This is from the 1850s. She was married to Joseph Johnson. This is probably a daguerreotype. It was a very early type of photograph. If you know the famous photo of Emily Dickinson was probably taken as a daguerreotype as well, the only known photograph of her. And as you can probably tell, this was a family of means. It's not everyone that could afford a family photo that was a daguerreotype in the 1850s. Now, unfortunately, you see some images in the back, and that's because I had to shoot this through glass. But hopefully the family will get it digitized, get the glass off, get it digitized, and put it back into the glass, because this is an amazing photo. So the incredible thing about Anne Wilder Jewett Johnson, so she lived in Minneapolis, and she was Anne's great-great-grandmother. And she and her husband owned the Loring Park homestead. And this was 160 acres around Loring Park. You can imagine how valuable that was. From Franklin Avenue over to Harmon, I believe it was LaSalle to Lindale. So just a tremendous amount. It was a farmstead. And they had a daughter named Nellie. And Nellie was Ann Cullen Smith's grandmother. Great-grandmother, sorry. So Nellie, I'm just doing a few tidbits of family history that I find really interesting. So Nellie married this dapper gentleman, E.P. Wells. E.P. Wells was originally from Wisconsin. Then he moved in 1878 to Jamestown, North Dakota. This guy was a mover and shaker in Jamestown. He founded the bank there. He was on the Dakota Assembly. He was, he founded a land company. He founded a milling company that he sold to Oxen Flour, eventually relocating to Minneapolis, where he lived on Groveland. So he and the family, he, his wife, and his daughter, in 1899, went to New York City. It was St. Patrick's Day. And they went there. There was a big St. Patrick's Day parade. This is the corner of 5th Avenue and 47th Street. And what happened in 1899, when they were there, tragedy struck. And there was a huge fire. And I'm going to read you what one of the chroniclers of this fire wrote about E.P. Wells and his family, his wife Nellie. So he said, Mr. Wells, his wife and their daughter were guests in the Windsor Hotel in New York City on St. Patrick's Day in 1899, when the terrible fire occurred there, in which many were killed or injured. 90 were killed, actually. They were watching a parade on the street below, and the room and quarters filled with smoke before they realized their danger. Mr. Wells secured a rope and lowered his wife and daughter from the 6th-story window to the pavement to safety. He realized that he could not go down hand over hand, so he wrapped his hands with towels and slipped down the rope while the crowd cheered the plucky North Dakota. And this was written in 1928. I'm not sure how factual it is. 6 floors down, lowering someone, I don't know. But he was an incredible guy. So that was E.P. Wells. And I was in New York a couple weeks ago, and I went to that same corner where the Windsor Hotel is, 5th Avenue, 47th Street, and that's what's there now. And here was E.P. Wells in his later days, still very dapper with his cane and the hat. And here's a large family photo. This photo kind of ties everything together. So here you see, so E.P. Wells and Nellie were Ann Cullen Smith's grandparents. So there's E.P. Wells right there. You probably recognize him from the other photos. There's Nellie, the daughter of the one in the daguerreotype. And there is Ann Cullen Smith. And I don't know how old she was there, maybe 12. And there, that I believe is her father. And her father was a Jewett. So his name was Frank Jewett. So you might wonder, why is his name Jewett appearing again? That's because I think third cousins married, and that was very common back then. So that's why there's a kind of a dual Jewett lineage. Frank was a mining engineer. He lived on the range. Ann was born in Hibbing in 1908, and then the family moved to Kenwood when she was very young. And this was Ann as a young woman. She went to Northrop Collegiate College. She went to Miss Erskine's finishing school, and she went to the Madeira School in Virginia. You may remember the Madeira School, some of you, as that was the whole thing with headmistress many years ago, murdered the Scarsdale doctor. It was a huge scandal in the U.S. So she went to that school long before that incident happened. I just thought it was an interesting tidbit. And so then she went to a party. Her parents threw a party, and a young man went to that party as well, and that was William Westfall Cullen. And he came from a distinguished family as well. He had Scottish ancestry. He was part of the Carr Cullen Company, which was a big sash and door manufacturer in Minneapolis. They were right next to where Graco is now, and they had, it was very big. It was about 2 to 3 blocks was the size of the building. And so according to Bill, Ann's son, he saw Ann sitting on the piano bench at her parents' house, and he said, "That's the girl for me." And then I don't think her parents were on board right away. I think they probably thought she was too young. And so they said, "Why don't you go to Europe for several months?" So she went there somewhere between 3 and 6 months. And they said, "Think about it if you really feel ready to get married." And the upshot is she came back, she felt ready to get married, and they got married. And they lived in the Kenwood, around the Kenwood area. And, you know, they were, as you can tell from the wedding, I mean, and this, they were, you know, there were social society pages in the newspapers back then. They were, you know, society people that had a long lineage in the Twin Cities. And then an amazing thing happened. So think about all of the history and the wealth and just how embedded they were in the culture. About after 5 or 6 years, Ann and her husband Bill decided to take a completely left turn and checked out Minnetonka, which then was the country. And this is the area of Minnetonka. Well, this is a large area of Minnetonka. But just to show you, this is from 1937. That's around the time that they moved. And I believe this is the Cullen property right there. This is Oakland Road. Rural House would be down here. Ridgedale, I think, was right over there. But you can see it was all farming. There were just no people, hardly any people out here then. So they moved here, and as Bill told me, they wanted a different kind of life. And that's certainly what they got. And here, this also shows you, does anyone know where this is? Minnetonka Mills, yes. So here you see, well, I'll show you because I went this afternoon.
Dairy Queen.
And I got current photos. So that's the new restaurant that she moved in. And those 2 buildings were in the photo. Now to the left, everyone knows what's to the left, right? The Dairy Queen. So that building was torn down, and there's a parking lot and the Dairy Queen there now. It was fun to research this history. Anyone know what this is? The old town hall, yes. And that's what it looked like. This was, I think, 1935. And if you notice, there was Cupola up there. And that's no longer there. And the reason I know is I took another photo a couple hours ago. So this is what they moved to, you know, it was Minnetonka Mills, there was not much else here. And then they built a house. And in 1937, Bill's sister Ann was, I think, about 2. Bill was 6 months old when they moved here, so they had 2 kids. This is the house. This is the tennis court. This is a big, huge vegetable garden that they had. And Ann and Bill would take their 41 Chevy and they would ride through the woods to do the harvest in the vegetable garden. They were quite self-sufficient. And so it was kind of like, if anyone remembers Green Acres, or for more contemporary audiences, Schitt's Creek. They were really going into a different environment than they were raised in. But apparently they loved it. And here's a closer view of the house with the horseshoe driveway. And they had sheep on the property, they had chickens. Here you see Ann, Ann's daughter's name is Ann also, and that's Bill, her brother, a couple of years younger. And there they are, maybe you can make out the pigs there. Is there a little dog there too? So Ann said, and I listened to her, there's an audio tape that was done for her in 2003. And she said that her daughter Ann was never a country girl. And Ann said, according to Bill, she said, why can't we just go to the store and buy potatoes like other people? And then when I had the privilege of meeting Ann several years ago, she was in town, she was in Milwaukee. I talked to her afterwards, and everyone, our friends, reveres the preserve. We just revere it. She said, I couldn't wait to get out of there. But you know, it was rural. You know, they got home off the bus, and there were kids to play with. It was hard. It was hard. So I appreciate that. You know, this was their parents' passion, not necessarily theirs. And here's Ann and Bill. And you can imagine with 30 acres and that kind of grass, they also worked hard. And I know they worked hard. I heard how hard they worked. And the house was really a huge gathering place. They had, they did Christmas caroling there, and they invited everyone back to their house. And Ann was very social, and they had music. She loved music. And here is a photo that shows Ann. She was known as Andy. Her friends called her Andy, and she's right in the middle there in later years. And I learned the story from some neighbors that have lived there 80 years in the neighborhood. And this woman said that her sister, older sister, had scarlet fever. And apparently with scarlet fever, there's a 10-day quarantine period. So what Andy did was she made a box and she had 10 bags in it. And each bag had something different. It was like some kind of toy or something for her to open up each day of her 10-day quarantine. So she was really a very thoughtful person. From the family, I heard she was more thoughtful to other people. A lot of stuff how that goes. So she was well loved. And she worked behind the scenes in Minnetonka. She was very engaged. She worked for political candidates. She went to city council meetings. One of the city managers that worked here said she was always dressed to the nines, and she really made an impression. And she also was a member of the Audubon Society. Ann loved nature, and her husband loved nature too, and they were very committed. And she loved bird watching. They went all over the world bird watching. Africa, Australia, Antarctica. She went to the Amazon in her 80s because she was a widow for quite a few years after Bill died. And she kept traveling. She had friends all over the world. And she loved watching the birds on her own property. And Bill died at 64 in 1970, and Ann was 62. So believe it or not, she was a widow for nearly 45 years. So a long life, if the math works. I think it does. And then she would go bird watching, and she had friends near Tucson, south of Tucson, Arizona, and there's rare hummingbird habitat. And It is the violet-crowned hummingbird, not many in the U.S. And then she heard through a niece. The niece told her the property was for sale. I think she was in her late 90s, early 100s at the time. And she got the people together to buy the property and save the bird habitat. And now it is the patent, that was when people sold the property, patent center for hummingbirds. So if you're ever in Tucson, it's right near the border. You can go down there. Hopefully you'll see one of those hummingbirds.
The town is Patagonia.
Patagonia is a town, okay. Thank you, Patagonia. Okay, so here she helped save this rare hummingbird habitat, but her own property. So according to Bill, Ann and Bill Sr. never wanted to profit from the land. They loved the land. And when Ann was in her late 90s, I'm sorry, it was in the late 90s that Bill started having conversations with the city of Minnetonka about how can we preserve this land. Well, fortunately, the city of Minnetonka had just set aside, I believe, $7 million for open space preservation. You've probably seen where they bought like houses on Minnehaha Creek and torn them down. And so this became this is like kind of the crown jewel of that open space preservation. And some of the people in the city that were active in this was John Gunyu, Perry Vetter, Darrell Peterson, and Jerrold Gershone. And so that in 2001 was when the open space money became available. And Bill, her son, came up with a win-win. So they basically paid half of the value of the property to the family. So it makes sense. So the family got something from it. But think of how generous this family was to be able to donate it. At the time, it was like worth $2.5 million, half. Now, it's like the houses are multi-million-dollar houses around there. So this was a very generous offer. And this went through the agreement in 2004. So it was part of the land trust. So this is a conservation easement. And Ann was very specific about what could and couldn't be done with the property, because the property was supposed to be for nature and the enjoyment of nature. And so she was very specific, and that's what's made this such an incredible piece of property, this 30 acres, because there's very little open space left, and if it's just a regular park, you know what happens if they become like recreation areas often. And nature often loses. This is different. This will be our only nature preserve once it's designated. Not designated yet, but it's on its way, which I'll explain. So she went through the land trust, and they administered the easement and how the land is used. And she was honored for her efforts by the city. And so this was 2004. Ann lived another 11 years. No one thought she would live to 106. It's incredible. And she lived 100 to 105 on the land itself. So here she was in her later years, but still very active. And someone said that, so I'll tell the story. She had, her bedroom was on the second floor. And she was really not able to walk up there in later years. Before that, she said, why would I want a bedroom on the first floor? I need that exercise going up and down. And then once she couldn't even walk the stairs, she would hoist herself up. Even though she could have afforded a lift, that's the way she did it. And as someone said, well, I'll wait to tell that line. But she was moved, the family moved her to Hillcrest Nursing Home, which is not far from Cullen Nature Reserve. I don't know if it's still there, it might be gone now. And she went there, it was not for her. So she signed out and she gave a 30-day notice. She said just to show that she was cooperative. So the family moved her over there, and then within 30 days, they had to move her back. And then I think after a couple of years, when she was 105, then she moved back there where she passed. But as one of the family members, she was a stubborn old thing. I mean, remember that picture, that portrait? She was very determined. So, and she passed at 106. So now we'll get back to the land, because it's about the people and the people who made this land happen. And I found out about this land because I live near there. And so I would walk by there and I think, what's going on here? It's so rare to see places that weren't being developed. And this is what it looked like. So what you see there, remember I said oak savanna was predominant. That's an old oak, kind of like the one in front. The old oaks, savanna oaks had long limbs, horizontal limbs. This is all buckthorn, all buckthorn in there. And the buckthorn was smothering all the old oaks. And there were still old oaks on the property, like a couple 100-year-old oaks. I don't know how they survived the sawmill. There was a sawmill one time in Minnetonka Mills. Maybe because it's very hilly, the property. There's about 5 knolls on it. And so that's what it was like. Not much was happening. So I went out there with a work colleague, and Heather Holm, who's not here tonight, and is an author, culinary expert. And I took her out there, and her jaw dropped. She saw the possibilities for that place. So we formed a friends group here at my house, and I see some people that were there in the audience tonight, like Ann Hanley and George Skinner. They're sitting over there, and they were in on it at the beginning. And we said, let's form a 501c3. Let's work with the city to restore this property, this jewel of a property. So we got to work. This is Lee Freilich in the center there. And Lee is the head of the Department of Forest Ecology at the University of Minnesota. And he came out there and he talked to us about the long limbs, showing that was a savanna because the oaks, nothing was competing with it. Because when oaks have competition, their limbs, they don't grow out like that. So that's how we knew it was an oak savanna at one time. And the southwest slopes were ripe to be restored for savanna. And this is Matt Kumpka, who works for the city, Park and Trails Manager. And so we've been working hand in hand with the city on the restoration. And so we wrote grants along with the city. We got 2 grants. We got a Minnesota grant, and we got a DNR grant. We got some money from the city, and we put a lot of sweat equity in. And then what we did was during the winter when the ground is frozen, we got this guy named Mike. He came down from Ely, Minnesota. He's a forester, and he has this equipment called a feller buncher, and very specialized. So what he would do is go in and grab and cut the buckthorn. So these are all buckthorn that you're seeing. And this was a huge operation. And we worked with the city. The snowplow trucks came and picked it up and took it to the city public works. And it was a constant movement of trucks in and out of there to get all this biomass. But this is what allowed us to free up the savanna. And so here you can see a before and after shot, one of the old oaks. And there you see right after, I think it was that winter, how it's been freed up. And then we got to work with the restoration. And here is one of our great volunteers, Bob. He's over there. Bob was pulling garlic mustard, and we got wonderful volunteers. And so that can smother the ground layer, the garlic mustard. The buckthorn could smother the upper layers and the ground layer. If we didn't do anything, what would have happened is these old oaks would die, no oak regeneration. So literally it was at a tipping point. It would have just been a dead zone, a monoculture of buckthorn. So I think we got it right at the right time. And then here's a board member, Angela Herrera, and she is seeding. So we went in, we did hand seeding. And then what's really interesting is we're doing a lot of research there. So this is vegetation research. And what we do is we have, I think it's 18 plots, 3 meters by 3 meters. And we go in there and we count all the vegetation. Some we might have to estimate. There's a lot of it. And we're doing this every year to see how things are changing. So, it's called citizen science. I believe a lot of this research could be published. And we got an aquatic biologist out there because we have a vernal or ephemeral pool on the island. There's an island there that I'll show you later. So there's a pool that only exists in the spring. And he got a hand lens, and he showed us there's little fairy shrimp and other shrimp that live in these pools. And apparently there's salamanders too. I haven't seen them yet. Be nice to see that. And then Heather Holm, who I mentioned, does pollinator surveys. We didn't start that till 2 years ago. There was no reason to do it because it was all shaded, it was all buckthorn. And now we're getting the native plants in there. And then the bird surveys. So we do bird surveys every spring. And we invite the public. It's really fun. You don't have to know anything. Just bring binoculars. We have expert birders. 2 are sitting right there that lead it. Russ and Rita Sandstrom. And they just do a great job of leading these bird surveys. People really enjoy it. And here's what we've documented. So here it is, 2022. You see all of the shade, 36 bird species, not so much. And this is over a period in the spring of quite a few weeks that we do the survey. Okay, then later in 2022, you see after the restoration, it's pretty barren and kind of looks like a war zone. But there are more bird species, 52 bird species. And then in 2023, you see more vegetation, and you see 63 bird species, and you see some really unusual, well, not unusual birds, but, I guess for this area, you don't see them as often, like the rose-breasted grosbeak and the red-eyed, well, there's a lot of red-eyed vireo. Birders, correct me if I'm wrong here. So, but we've seen some great birds. And then in 2024, last year, 72 bird species. And you see more vegetation growing there. And I want to point out this bird right here, the red-headed woodpecker. And this is our signature bird, our aspirational bird for the Cullen Nature Preserve. Because these used to be in the preserve, and before it was a preserve, and they are absolutely dependent on oak savanna. Oak savanna is a very rare habitat. These birds need their open spaces. They're in serious decline. Well, in 2024, we actually saw a red-headed woodpecker there. Our goal is to get nesting pair. We haven't gotten that yet. But when we saw that red-headed woodpecker, people just went crazy. Because that's what we've been shooting for. So now if we can just get a couple of them to nest there, we're good. So how do we know? How do we know that the red-headed woodpeckers were there on the property? The reason we know is, here's Bill Cullen, fat, who's maybe 8 years old. We know because Bill told us he would see them all the time, not just when he was 8, but later years too. And if you don't believe me, you can ask Bill himself, because Bill's sitting right over there. Bill, can you stand up, please? Just a few years later, and Bill's there with his wife, Kate, and we were hoping his sister Ann could be here, but unfortunately she couldn't tonight. And then there's other family members that are here that I want to recognize. So Ted Jewett, are you Ted? Yeah. Ted and Debbie Jewett are here. And you remember the Jewett name from way back, 1850s and more, and from England, from France. So they're the lineage of that name. And Nancy Jewett. Debbie? Oh, Debbie Jewett, okay. And then Kathleen Jewett. So these are your family members. Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. And the community is so indebted to your generosity. And the name lives on. It's just, this will be here for years and years to come. So it's just an incredible gift. And so we talked before about Native Americans and how are savannas maintained. So if you don't maintain a savanna, they eventually become wooded. And the Native Americans use savannas as hunting grounds because they were open. You could see the prey. You could also see if there were any predators coming toward you. So you have long vistas. As I said, west of 101 was the big woods, the maple basswood, so there was more different types of subsistence there, probably maple syrup gathering, but these were more hunting grounds. So the Native Americans maintained it primarily with light fires, and that's what got rid of the non-fire resistant trees. So not all trees are fire resistant, but the big oaks are fire resistant. They have very thick bark. And that's how you get the oaks to regenerate themselves. You get the grass layer, you get the flowers and the forbs, and they're extremely biodiverse habitats. They are among the most threatened, I believe, in the state. Also among the most biodiverse because they're kind of a combination of a woodland and a prairie. So you kind of get the best of both worlds and everything in between. Some areas in the preserve don't have much tree cover, some have quite a bit. And we're not restoring all of it to savanna, but a good portion, about 12 acres. So the Native Americans maintain it by lighting fires, and this fall, we should be having our first burn in Cullen Nature Preserve. So this is really a big deal for us. The reason we haven't been able to do it for now is there wasn't enough fuel to burn. There wasn't enough plants or oak leaves, so the fire wouldn't go anywhere. So you need the perfect combination of fuel and weather conditions. So cross your fingers, we'll be burning, and that will allow the ground layer to regenerate. It will get rid of weeds, and the flowers and the grasses will flourish. And as you can see here, it's open up. There's flowers flourishing there. And again, the open vistas of the savanna. Not open to the public yet. Hopefully, we will open maybe in a couple of years, but we are making progress. So the city and the Friends and other interested people have been working on a master plan. So the master plan is how do humans use the preserve? That's the trails, the interpretation, very limited parking, boardwalks, that kind of thing. So this is now published. It's on Minnetonka Matters. So if you go to Minnetonka Matters, you can see the full draft plan, and you can comment if you want, because we love feedback. And here we talked about the preserve and the island. This is an island. The island has a vernal pool there that you saw. These are the walkways that we're proposing. Boardwalks where you can have bird watching areas where you can observe the island, and from here as well. But the island, we work with consultants in the city, and we all agreed, let's leave the island for the birds. I mean, they don't have any place where they're not. Everywhere else, there's activity. And so we want to attract ground nesting birds there. This is a way to do it. And so there you see the extreme elevation. But we will, which makes it really interesting, but we will be having there's limited parking here, and the homestead site was here with the horseshoe driveway, remember? The home is no longer there, and there'll be a nice ADA accessible path with overlooks here as well. So this is in draft form right now, and there you can see, that's called a council ring, so for informal meetings, but we want to keep it as natural as possible. And there's some examples of boardwalks for the wetland. And also, if you want more information, you can go to our website, Friends of Cullen Nature Preserve, and learn about what we're up to there. Or if you want to donate, you can go there too. Or there's also a little box that the Historical Society set up for donations if you're so inclined. We also have an email list if you want to sign up for our newsletter. And our newsletter is like 3 or 4 times a year. So that is Cullen Nature Preserve and the legacy of Ann Cullen Smith. Thank you very much. And I'll entertain questions too.
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about Ann's vegetable garden now? I thought that was so
About the vegetable garden.
Yeah, what's happening with the vegetable garden now?
Oh, yeah, well, for some reason, the vegetable garden was graded, and that you saw it on that one photo. And for some reason, there's a lot more flowers. The flowers have taken much better, the wildflowers in the vegetable garden. I'm not sure why, but that disturbance seemed to help in this case. Was that what you were referring to?
Yeah, and how it's still so diverse and that,
Yeah.
and everything else.
Yeah.
So interesting.
And until we open to the public, as I said, we have the bird survey events. So we welcome everyone. We publish dates in the spring, and that's a great way to see the preserve. Other questions or comments? Diane?
Yeah, how did the buckthorn get there? Because it's everywhere, and I know you said it was brought in, it's an invasive
Well,
species. But
Yeah, so it's European buckthorn, so it's from Europe.
yeah.
And it was brought in as a hedge plant. And who knows, maybe some of the Jewets brought it in. You never know.
Bird droppings as well.
What's that?
Bird droppings.
Yes, the birds, it's called, the scientific name is Rhanus cathartica. So it gives the birds diarrhea, unfortunately. And so the birds spread it that way. And it's everywhere. And we have another group, which Harold mentioned, Friends of Minnetonka Parks. And we're working in a lot of our parks, and we have some people there. If you could raise your hands, anyone's Friends of Minnetonka Parks. Thank you for coming tonight. And they do wonderful work in our parks. And we have cards for Friends of Minnetonka Parks. It's a fabulous website. You can learn about the ecology of our parks by going to that website. We also have other birders here, as I mentioned, Ann and George, and Ann Hanley is on our park board. So, did I answer your question about the buckthorn?
Yeah, I have one more question.
Sure.
Okay, when you said that it was Savannah originally and the whole area, okay, in Hillway Park you have all those pine trees.
Right.
Are those natural to the area?
No, those were planted.
They were
It's
planted.
a plantation, yeah.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think it was after Ann Cullen Smith moved to the property. It was in the 40s that was planted. So that's how long ago it was. But we are making progress with buckthorn. And then that audio tape of Ann Cullen Smith, she is complaining about the buckthorn in 2004, that long ago. And she was older, she wasn't going out there removing the buckthorn. So there was a lot. And we couldn't walk through that. It was that bad. So, yes.
Jerrold, was any of that land actually ever farmed, used as did they have farming?
I don't, that land was not farmed. That's why there's so many old oak trees there, which are incredible. Across the street was a dairy farm, a big dairy farm. There was, on the audio tape, which you can access to the Minnetonka Historical Society, she was interviewed by Betty Johnson, who was active with the Historical Society, and they talk about all the farms around there. And there are like 7 or 8 right around the area. It was all farms. But Cullen Nature Preserve, Cullen property was not farmed. Is that true, Bill, to your knowledge? Okay, good question. Yes?
Yeah, Bill Jepson, I just wanted to thank you for noting that Betty Johnson, in 2003, with our oral history, she sat down with Ann for an hour and a half and recorded it on a cassette tape. And a couple years ago, she passed, and her children gave it to me to digitize. And so I'm glad that we just put it up on our website. You can just push one button and listen to her for an hour and a half. And you may put it on yours as well?
Yeah, we'll put it on our Cullen Nature, Friends of Cullen Nature Preserve website. It's very historical and it's very conversational. You know, it takes, you kind of have to listen in segments because it's long.
Yeah.
But to hear Ann Cullen Smith's voice, real time, it's a treasure. So you had a question too?
Yeah, what's the best process for getting rid of buckthorn? Because I can't.
It's very tenacious, and there's different processes. So the volunteers, what we do is we cut it and we daub it with a little like a bingo dauber called there's a small amount of herbicide. It just goes around the circulatory system, the outer part of the buckthorn. And if you do it later in the year, it will kill it. But you have to do it right, you have to get it close, you have to get the right chemical in there. We don't like using chemicals. It's kind of the only way to do it large scale. And then, but there's no spray, so you wear gloves, it doesn't get on you, you don't breathe it in. And then the city bought a forestry mower a couple of years ago, and the forestry mower goes in there. Well, I think that's what the guy from Ely, he used a forestry mower as well. And it goes in there and just grinds all the buckthorn. And when it's ground, and it's not a clean cut, it tends to suppress growing back. But they also go in and the city sprays it. But you may have seen off of Essex Road, they did a huge area that was all buckthorn infested in Meadow Park. You've probably seen this in our various parks. There in Meadow Park, several areas are doing it. That's another way. Another bit of research that's going on at the Cullen Nature Preserve, University of Minnesota has plots there, and they're looking at what's called a critical cut method. So if you have buckthorn that's about yay tall, you cut it here, and then you go back several times. The leaves will come at the top, and they're very weak. And you just take a gloved hand and you get rid of the leaves, and eventually you'll exhaust the plant. No herbicide. You can't cut it low because then it becomes what we call angry buckthorn. And then it's very hard to get rid of. So they're studying cutting it high. What's that?
What time of year do you cut it?
Well, that's what they're attempting to analyze right now. I think they're cutting it at different times of the year, and they're analyzing, researching how often you have to go back to remove the leaves. I've done this for years on my neighbor's property, and just when I walk by, I'll just take off the leaves. I've done it, is totally anecdotal, but I've done it several different times during the year, and it works.
So Jerrold,
Yeah.
and one other opportunity, if you'd like to work a few hours as a volunteer with Master Naturalists, we have several restoration events between now and the end of the season on our website for Friends of Minnetonka Parks. And you really do learn a lot because you're working side by side with Master Naturalists. They'll be showing you some of the good plants that are around them and what you want to keep in the yard.
Exactly.
I'm surprised you didn't go there.
But feel free to ask any of our Friends of Minnetonka Parks members about what's going on. I'd like to acknowledge Leslie Yetka. Back there, please raise your hand. And Leslie is our natural resources manager in the city. And we've been partnering, as I said, with the city to get all this accomplished. And Matt's not here, is he?
He is not.
Okay. So, so that's been great. And we'll continue to make great strides. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, the wetland health evaluation, since that is on a wetland kind of a aspect, what shape is that in?
Well,
Does it-
Leslie, I would let you answer that question. She asked about the health of the wetland there.
Well, it's similar to many of the wetlands in Minnetonka that are impacted by invasive species, so invasive cattail, our non-native type of cattail. It does have a large community of Phragmites, which is a giant reedgrass. We think most of that is actually native, not non-native. So, we haven't done a lot of surveying of the wetland to see the biodiversity of the plants, but we are actually working with the Friends on restoring the buffer area, which is the shoreline where the wetland meets the upland. So we're going to be, I think you guys are going to be planting a lot of plugs coming up this
In a
fall.
couple weeks.
Yep,
Yeah.
and so that just helps incorporate the native plant community and different plants.
And I asked the question only because many, many years ago, I volunteered for the wetland evaluation thing, and I just kind of stepped away from it. I couldn't tolerate, my knee didn't tolerate going into the, whatever. But, so I'm just curious, is that type of thing still going on?
So what she's referring to is the Wetland Health Evaluation Program, or WEP, and that was a county program.
It was, okay.
Yep, unfortunately, it was during COVID, it kind of stopped, and it has never restarted again.
Okay.
So.
Because I know that the other thing was that purple loosestrife was, that's when they were starting to release the
beetles,
bugs
yeah.
were the beetles.
And we still do some beetle releases large wetland areas that where we have purple lucite. It's never going to completely eliminate it, but it does sort of keep it in check.
I had one other thing, it was a great question. When you saw where the boardwalks are going, when we were out there with Professor Lee Freilich, he suggested doing a demonstration wetland restoration. So this would be between the boardwalk and the mainland. So we could see the wetlands are tough, really tough. And, volunteers can work on land, we can't work in the wetland. So there's ways to restore them, but it takes a lot of money, a lot of effort. I think you had a question too.
I was just wondering if goats had been considered. Maybe you should have your own herd of goats.
Yeah.
Just-
Well, there were goats used there.
There were.
Yes, in the beginning, I think Janet had some goats out there, didn't she?
She did, yeah.
And goats tend to be non-selective, and they'll eat everything. So you have to, for dense areas of buckthorn, they're good because they can, get rid of a lot. But you want to, keep some of the good stuff too. And they need to be fenced in. So it's, have you had much luck with goats in the city?
Well, not really just for that reason. They have to be fenced in, they do eat everything, so you'll lose some of the native plants that you want to keep. So they tend to be somewhat high maintenance, even though they're fun to see.
Yes.
They're a little high
Everybody
maintenance.
loves goats.
I mean, I just kind of pictured having goats that live there full time.
Yeah.
I didn't know the articles in the newspaper don't mention that they eat everything.
Yeah.
They make it sound like they really like white farm
Right.
all, and that's all they eat.
They're non-selective. I want to acknowledge one other person, John Arthur, if you could raise your hand. One of our board members for Cullen Nature Preserve. Thank you for coming. And Helen Severs is back there. She's waving. And Helen, we got Ann Collins-Smith's scrapbook from Bill. And Helen has gone through the painstaking process of digitizing that. And a lot of the photos are from there tonight. And Helen's done yeoman's work on that. And that will be available to the Historical Society as well. So preserving history. Bill.
I don't have a question, I just want to say that the Cullen family is very, very grateful to you especially, and Helen, and Heather, for the enormous amount of work that you have put in on this. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. I can't believe it, so I know my mother would be very happy and grateful to all the other volunteers that work so hard.
Thank you. That means a lot, thank you. And it is a labor of love for a lot of us, it truly is. And I know how you always said that your mother loved volunteerism. And I think we feel her spirit when we go there. So, yeah, it's just an amazing legacy. A legacy of stewardship. Any other questions? I think we're good. Thank you all.